Caira and Leah Christopher were 15-year-old twin sisters with bright futures ahead of them. They were students at Helix High School in Lemon Grove, California, balancing academics with their love for basketball. Their mother, Joanne Hoyt, described them as kind, caring, and full of life. But in April 2020, their lives were cut short in a horrifying act of violence at the hands of someone who they once trusted. On April 15, 2020, Dwayne Edward Groves Jr., Joanne's ex-boyfriend, stormed into their home with a gun. Joanne had broken up with him about a week and a half earlier, and his response was pure rage. He called her just before the attack, telling her he had a plan and to trust him, but there was no warning for what came next. Moments later, he shot his way through a sliding glass door and immediately opened fire upon them. He shot Caira first before moving through the house and killing Leah. He then turned his attention to Joanne's oldest son, 22-year-old Gary. He brutally beat Gary with the gun, leaving him with a broken arm and deep wounds to his head. Meanwhile, Joanne grabbed her younger children and fled the home. After attacking Gary, Groves fled the scene, trying to escape capture, but police found him hiding in a backyard just a few houses away. His gun was still at the scene, with the serial number scratched off, a failed attempt to cover his tracks. Before leaving the house that night, he left Joanne with chilling final words. "You always wanted a story to write, now you have a book." When it came time for justice, Groves pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder and an assault charge for attacking Gary. In court, Joanne spoke about how her family was torn apart and how her surviving children still suffer from the trauma of that night. In the end, Groves was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 72 years. The Florida School for Boys, later called the Arthur G. Dozier School for Boys, was a juvenile reform school run by the state of Florida from 1900 to 2011. Located in Marianna, with a second campus opening in Okeechobee in 1955, it was once the largest reform school in the country. Over a period of 111 years, it became infamous for horrific abuse, including physical beatings, sexual assault, torture, and even murder at the hands of staff. Despite multiple investigations and promises of reform, the cruelty and mistreatment never stopped. Abuse at Dozier was reported as early as 1903, when children were found shackled in leg irons. Investigations over the years revealed shocking conditions, including a 1914 dormitory fire that killed at least 6 students, a 13-year-old boy dying in 1934, just 38 days after being sent there for trespassing, and overcrowding with kids locked up for minor offenses like truancy or smoking. In 1968, Florida Governor Claude Kirk visited the school and was horrified by what he saw, saying someone should have blown the whistle a long time ago. At the time, the school held 564 boys, some as young as 10. Even though corporal punishment was officially banned that year, reports of violence, brutal beatings, and unexplained deaths continued. By the 1980s and 1990s, more stories of torture and mistreatment came out. The ACLU sued over cases where boys were hogtied and kept in isolation for weeks, and the Department of Justice stepped in to monitor Florida's juvenile justice system. In 2009, after Dozier failed a state inspection, new investigations confirmed ongoing abuse. After years of trouble, the school was finally shut down in June 2011. Even after it closed, dark secrets kept coming to light. Concerns about missing boys and unmarked graves led to an investigation in 2012, led by forensic anthropologist Erin Kimmerly from the University of South Florida. Her team found 55 burials, many outside the official cemetery, and uncovered records of nearly 100 deaths. By 2016, 7 DNA matches and 14 presumptive identifications had been made. In 2019, during a pollution cleanup, 27 more suspected graves were discovered, prompting Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to launch another investigation. One of the most infamous parts of Dozier was the White House, a detention building constructed in 1929. In the 1950s and the 1960s, it became the site of brutal beatings, where guards whipped boys until they lost consciousness. Former students, now known as the White House Boys, later came forward to share their stories. One survivor, Jerry Cooper, recalled being beaten 135 times with a leather strap when he was just 16 years old. Others said they saw boys die from their injuries or locked inside industrial dryers as punishment. The state sealed the White House in 2008 and placed a memorial plaque there. In 2017, Florida officially apologized to Dozier survivors. The next year, the legislature approved funding for memorials in Tallahassee and Marianna, as well as financial restitution. In 2024, a bill sponsored by Representative Michelle Salzman and Senator Darrell Rowson was passed to compensate survivors and their families. Even today, men who endured the horrors of Dozier continue to fight for justice. In 2025, more than 800 survivors applied for restitution, and the Florida legislature allocated $20 million to be split among them. The legacy of Dozier's atrocities even inspired Colson Whitehead's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, The Nickel Boys, which was adapted into a film in 2024. The story of Dozier remains a dark chapter in Florida's history. For over a century, boys sent there, many of the pettiest of reasons, suffered unimaginable abuse. Even though the school is now gone, the scars remain, and survivors continue to demand justice for those who never made it out. Kathleen Ruth Smiley was born on May 22, 1957, in Florida and went by Kathy. By 1974, 16-year-old Kathy was now living in the northern suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia, where she was known as a friendly, warm, spirited, and ambitious girl. She had moved with her family to the area a few years prior after spending time overseas. She was a senior at Lakeside High School in DeKalb County, where she was recognized for her academic drive, taking extra classes to graduate a year early. Kathy had big dreams, initially aspiring to become a veterinarian, but later considered teaching as a career. Despite her ambitions, Kathy's life was shaped by the complexities of her family's circumstances. Her parents, Dale and Jacqueline Smiley, had recently separated, and her father had moved to Minneapolis for his job. Kathy, her younger sister, Patricia, and their mother had stayed behind in Atlanta. Regardless of his relocation, Kathy's father, a corporate marketing representative for Gillette, was still a significant part of her life. The weekend of April 20th, 1974, was one Kathy was looking forward to because her father planned to visit for a family day at Lake Lanier, where they would picnic and swim. The morning after arriving, Kathy and Patricia drove to a Denny's restaurant to meet their father for breakfast. Kathy had just turned 16 the previous year and was given a red 1972 Volkswagen Beetle as a gift. After breakfast, Kathy's father agreed to take Patricia with him to the lake while Kathy was to go home to retrieve her swimsuit and water skis. Sadly, it was the last time Patricia and her father saw Kathy alive. After parting ways at the restaurant, Kathy made a quick phone call to her mother, letting her know that she would be heading home soon to grab a few things before joining them at the lake, but she never returned. Kathy's path took her to an access road near Interstate 85, where she encountered two men, Pinckney Thomas Mitchell and Wallace Charles Lanford, both fugitives from North Carolina. They were looking for a way to get back to their home state, having recently escaped their respective troubles. Mitchell and Lanford, both in their early 20s, were desperate for money and drugs. After meeting Kathy, they convinced her to help them by offering her some gas for her car in exchange for a ride to North Carolina. Kathy, trusting or simply not thinking of the danger, agreed. She drove her red Volkswagen to a nearby Shell service station on Shellford Road, where the men bought gas. A clerk recalled that Mitchell, who seemed fidgety and out of place, was acting oddly as he asked about the route to Lake Lanier and North Carolina, requesting a map of the area. At the same station, Mitchell took a rope from the ground, secretly pocketing it as he made small talk. After filling the car, Kathy, Mitchell, and Lanford drove away from the station, unaware of the impending violence. Somewhere between Shallowford Road and the exit toward Lake Lanier, the two men overpowered Kathy. They pulled her off the road and drove her to Gaston County, North Carolina. Once there, they took her into a wooded area near the old Lincoln Academy, where they sexually assaulted her. Mitchell, in a statement later given to authorities, described how he had sexually assaulted Kathy before Lanford took his turn. The violence escalated, and Mitchell, fueled by drugs and anger, viciously attacked Kathy, stabbing her repeatedly. After killing her, they tied her lifeless body to a tree, leaving it in the woods as they drove away. They returned to the area hours later, where they attempted to cover up their crime by burning Kathy's car and disposing of the evidence. Mitchell, in the presence of Lanford, later bragged to his brother-in-law, Stuart, about what they had done. He admitted to the murder, describing it as a big one. This confession was later used against them during their trial. Kathy's body was found later that afternoon, about 5 hours after she was last seen. Her body was discovered by a passerby near the old Lincoln Academy, where she had been left dead, bound and gagged with an electrical cord. The brutality of the crime shocked the local community. The Volkswagen, which the men had set ablaze, was discovered burned beyond recognition. Their subsequent attempt to cover up their involvement failed, and soon the police had enough evidence to arrest them. During their trial, it was revealed that Mitchell had a criminal history. He had previously been convicted of crimes such as traffic offenses, assault, and larceny, and had escaped from a correctional facility in North Carolina. Despite the chilling details of the murder, the defendant's defense strategies varied. Mitchell claimed he didn't remember killing Kathy, attributing the violence to a drug-induced haze, but his statements and actions left little room for doubt. Lanford, although admitting to being present at the scene, denied participating in the assault, but his presence and the evidence pointed to his complicity in the crime. In the end, both were convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. However, the death sentences were later commuted to life in prison. Both Mitchell and Lanford have since passed while still in prison. The haunting nature of her death, combined with the eerie atmosphere of the Lincoln Academy site, led to rumors that Kathy's spirit still lingered in the woods, a tragic figure trapped by the violence she suffered. In the 40 years following her death, the location where Kathy was killed has become infamous, with many visitors reporting strange occurrences and an overwhelming sense of sorrow hanging over the area. Whether these reports are rooted in truth or simply the product of a community's grief and fear, Kathy's memory has lived on. Though the murderers were eventually caught, the emotional toll of Kathy's brutal killing continued to echo through her community for decades. The horror of that day on April 21, 1974, is one that still lingers in the hearts of those who knew her. Nadine Gurczenski was born in the early 1970s and spent most of her life in Toronto, Canada. By age 26, Nadine was working at a local strip club and was described as a young woman navigating life like many others her age, unaware of the brutal fate that would soon befall her. On May 8, 1999, police in Lincoln, a small town in Ontario's Niagara region, responded to a call about a disturbing discovery. Around 5 p.m., uniformed officers arrived at Victoria Avenue near 8th Avenue, where a passerby had spotted the partially clothed body of a woman lying in a roadside ditch. That woman was Nadine. It took authorities 2 weeks to identify her, finally doing so after releasing images of her face to the public and receiving crucial tips. Investigators quickly determined that Nadine had been strangled to death. However, despite collecting DNA evidence from the crime scene, no matches appeared in any existing databases. From the outset, detectives believed her killer was likely a truck driver, leading them to check truck stops between Niagara and Mississauga, where Nadine worked. In 2006, years after Nadine's murder, police charged Michael Durant in connection with two separate murders, one involving an exotic dancer whose body was discovered in a wooded area in January 2006, and another involving a sex trade worker who vanished in August 2003. Given Nadine's profession and the similarities in victim profiles, investigators considered whether Durant might be linked to her case. However, he was eventually ruled out as a suspect. For years, Nadine's case went cold. Despite exhaustive efforts, consulting national DNA databases, collaborating with Interpol, and coordinating with agencies in the US and UK, no significant leads surfaced. In 2021, new hope emerged. Advances in forensic technology offered investigators an opportunity to revisit the case through genetic genealogy, a method unavailable when Nadine was killed. The Niagara Regional Police Service Homicide Unit teamed up with the Toronto Police Service Cold Case Unit, the Centre of Forensic Sciences, the Chief Coroner's Office, and Ontario's Ministry of the Attorney General to apply these cutting-edge tools to the lingering mystery. The killer's DNA profile, initially collected at the crime scene, was sent to a U.S.-based laboratory specializing in genetic genealogy. In 2023, their efforts finally paid off when the killer was identified as Joseph Archie Brousseau, who went by Raymond. Unfortunately, I was unable to find a photo of him. Brousseau was a truck driver, originally from New Liskeard, a town in northern Ontario. He was 34 years old at the time of Nadine's murder and died in 2017, years before police were able to confirm his involvement. Investigators were able to obtain a DNA sample from Brousseau posthumously and compared it to the DNA left at the crime scene, and it was a match. Further investigation revealed that Brousseau matched the original profile built by police. He had worked as a long-haul truck driver for many years, traveling extensively across Canada and the United States. There was also evidence indicating that Brousseau frequented the Niagara region during his trucking routes, though no records suggested any prior connection to Nadine before their fatal encounter. Detectives now believe Brousseau likely picked Nadine up after work and killed her shortly after. His DNA has not been linked to any other unsolved cases in Canada's National DNA Database, and no additional crimes connected to him have surfaced. In 1993, Soul Asylum's Runaway Train music video featured images of 36 missing children in the U.S. version, aiming to raise awareness and aid in their recovery. The video became a groundbreaking effort, with over 70 missing children featured globally across various regional versions, including the UK, Canada, Australia, and a Spanish version featured on the show Quien Sabe Donde, which focused on missing children in Spanish-speaking countries. Its widespread exposure on platforms like MTV significantly boosted public awareness and directly contributed to the recovery of multiple children. Runaway Train became a groundbreaking example of how music and media could be harnessed for social activism, blending emotional storytelling with real-world action to help solve cold cases. The song's global reach made a significant impact, leading to the recovery of 21 children. However, not all recoveries led to joyful reunions, as some children had fled abusive or traumatic situations and did not want to be found. Among the children, Dina McNichol and Vicky Hamilton were featured in the UK version of the video. In 2007, their remains were discovered in the garden of Scottish serial killer Peter Tobin. Andrea Bowman, featured in the U.S. version, disappeared in 1989, and in 2020, her adopted father confessed to her murder. Despite the video's success, as of 2019, 11 children featured in the video remain unaccounted for. These include Andrea Durham, last seen at her Florida apartment in 1990, Byron Page, who vanished from Los Angeles in 1992, and Christopher Kersey, who disappeared from his home in Minnesota in 1990. A particularly powerful story comes from Elizabeth Wiles, now known as Liz Vadavec, who shared her experience as one of the missing children featured in the video during an interview with Zuri Hall. At 13 years old, Liz ran away from home with her 19-year-old boyfriend, Ron. They hitchhiked from California and lived under the radar for nearly 2 years, renting a small one-bedroom apartment while Liz kept a low profile to avoid drawing attention due to her youthful appearance. Unbeknownst to Liz, Soul Asylum's frontman Dave Perner was collaborating with director Tony Kaye on the music video. Inspired by the idea of missing children featured on milk cartons, they aimed to use the video to help find real missing children. When the video was released, Liz saw herself featured while visiting a friend's house. The sight terrified her, and her boyfriend suggested it might be time to consider going home. A shocking realization for Liz, whose entire life had revolved around being with him. Overwhelmed by fear and emotions, Liz tried to take her own life. Fortunately, a friend intervened just in time, and Liz was taken to the hospital where she called her mother for the first time in years to let her know she was alive and safe. Returning home proved difficult for Liz. The first 5 to 10 years were marked by struggles as she tried to find her place in life. It wasn't until she met her husband that she began to feel valued and secure. For years, Liz hid her past, fearing judgment for the mistakes she had made. Eventually, she realized that sharing her story could help others dealing with similar struggles. What initially seemed like a painful reminder of her past became a source of healing and hope for both Liz and other families affected by missing persons cases. The Runaway train video stands as a testament to the power of media to create life-changing impacts and bring attention to those who need it most.